This is the Skeptic Squared podcast.
A safe place to make light of sacred things.
My name is Matt.
And I'm Corinne.
And in this program, we will be discussing current events related to religion, atheism, and skepticism. Our goal is not to insult believers,
Although that will probably happen from time to time.
but rather to share our point of view on these topics in a way which will benefit and entertain others.
Or maybe we just want to stroke our own egos. You decide.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Squared podcast. Today is Sunday, July 17th, 2016, and with me is my wife, Corinne.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Yeah.
I feel like we do that a lot. Just, how are you? I'm good. That's great. Fine. Great.
We do that every time we record.
No,
I don't know what else to say.
I don't either.
I mean, I could be really detailed, but I'd rather not be.
How detailed would you like to be?
Not detailed at all. That's why I'm not.
Fair enough. Today, we decided that it would be a good idea to do a review, another movie review, which we haven't done for a while.
Yeah, it's been a while.
A couple months, I think. And we chose an old Mormon movie.
Yay.
It's a movie that came out in the year 2000, which was the year that I went on a mission. And this movie is actually about missionaries, Mormon missionaries. It's called God's Army. And I thought to start, it would be kind of fun to just read the description or the plot summary on IMDb for this movie. Okay, just to give you a little context of what this is. So life as a Mormon missionary isn't what 19-year-old Brandon Allen expected. So many rules and so few successes. Los Angeles is as unrepentant as Sodom and Gomorrah. He's forced to share a small apartment with 5 young prank-loving missionaries. And, to top it off, his first companion, 29-year-old Marcus Dalton, proves to be a harsh mentor. After only one day as a missionary, Allen is ready to hang up his necktie and go home. His point of view changes, however, as he begins to see the struggles and sacrifices that the other missionaries endure. Dalton, he soon learns, is fighting a losing battle with cancer. Banks, an African-American missionary, was disowned by his family when he joined the Mormon Church. Actually didn't pick up on that during the movie. Kinniger, a fifth-generation Latter-day Saint, finds himself doubting under the intellectual attacks of anti-Mormons. Working and living with these young men, Allen becomes a part of the drama occurring under the everyday surface of missionary life. After only a few intense days, Allen finds faith he didn't know he had, and courage he didn't know he lacked. Oh, that's sweet. He learns that the time has come to put away childish things, a favorite Mormon phrase, and to become more than just a man, to become a man of God.
Yeah, half that stuff you don't get at all in the movie.
Yeah. So it opens with a guy named Allen. His last name is Allen, and they pretty much only use last names on the mission. That's true to form. Yep. So he's what is he? He's coming off of the airplane, and he gets picked up by the other missionaries. And they have their little preliminary introductions. And he says that he's from Kansas, which of course starts the first recurring joke that he's not in Kansas anymore, being in L.A. now. He's serving in L.A. He comes from a broken family. His dad's in prison because
Stepdad.
Stepdad. His biological dad just disappeared one day, right?
Yeah, when he was 7.
When he was 7, and then his stepdad is now in prison for child molestation. And his mom, presumably because of all of the hardships she's had with her husbands, is now an ExMormon. She's requesting to have her name removed. And the first day he meets the other missionaries, and it goes not exactly as he expected, and so he decides that he's going to leave. And they convince him to stay by catching up with him at the bus station And they basically just call him a coward. They say he has weak morals, and they imply that he either struggles with the word of wisdom, which means that he either smokes or drinks.
They're doing this as a joke, though. They're not doing it.
It's not joke. Like it's one of those jokes that has like an underlying.
They're doing it to question his manliness. That's how I took it. It's not because they actually think that.
Missionaries would.
That's not what you get in the movie, though. That's not what I got in the movie. They're doing it because they know it's going to push his buttons and force him to go back.
Right, but anybody who's gone on a mission knows that this is pushing people's buttons because people actually struggle with these things and then just go on a mission. You know, especially with the whole like immorality thing with masturbation or being sexually active before your mission. Mm-hmm. Like that is a huge. Like it's a thing that they use to guilt trip people into leaving their mission early, or to like talk to their mission president to confess and go through the whole confessional repentance process thing. Like they say it in a joking way because they don't really want to pin him down, right? But anybody who's been on a mission, like this is the first thing they do in the MTC, in the Missionary Training Center, is they put you through this kind of ringer. They say, if you did these things, if you were masturbating and watching pornography before your mission and you didn't repent with your bishop about it, you need to feel really bad. You should feel so bad. And they will. Like I remember my first day in the MTC, we went to one of these devotionals where they did that exact thing, tried to make everybody feel guilty for watching porn. Okay. And afterwards, my companion, we went to just a little gathering with just our district or whatever, like just the missionaries that were going to our mission. And he walks into the room and he just says, "Wow, like I didn't even do anything wrong and I feel guilty."
Right.
You know, that's the culture that they breed. Okay. You know, in the movie, yeah, you're right. It's a little bit more joking or whatever, but it actually does reflect part of the missionary culture, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, so that's how they kind of coerce him into staying. Like they kind of challenge his conviction, kind of thing, challenge his manhood, and then he decides to stay. Let's see. We also on the first day we meet the mission president.
Who is kind of a dick.
He's
not a good mission president.
No, he's a bit jerky. You know, I actually kind of lucked out in my mission president. He was a man who worked for Brigham Young University, specifically in the Jerusalem Center. So he actually lived in Jerusalem, and he was just very ecumenical. He was generally pretty understanding of people, very positive, upbeat kind of guy. Very, very nerdy, but I mean that's fine, you know.
Yep.
Like this guy was like a probation officer. He was just this big lug of a man.
Well, like when we just watched an episode of Orange Is the New Black, and I put him in the jail, like he was one of the jail guards. The way he like attacked Elder Allen. Like, he's a struggling young man, and he's like, you're not here for yourself. You're here to do good for other people.
Right.
Your parents made bad decisions. That doesn't mean you make bad decisions, too. Like, it was, like,
not
the way you approach a struggling young man.
Right. Yeah. And anyway, and they never really... The way that they show it in the movie, it makes it sound like this is his first day of the mission.
Yeah, they don't talk about the MTC at all.
Right, the Missionary Training Center. So for somebody who actually does go on a mission, they would go to the Missionary Training Center. For someone like him who goes to a United States mission, already English speaking, like he's an American going to America, he would probably spend about 2 weeks there and then go to the mission. Okay, so he would go to Provo and then go to LA. So he would have already had most of these conversations in the MTC if he was really struggling with that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm.
And he would have already known the rules, too. Like, don't you go over the rules, like, a lot?
Yeah, like, there's two things that you leave the MTC with. One, you learn the discussions, and that usually entails learning a second language, because you have to be able to say the discussions in that language. And the second thing is, you learn what all the frickin' rules are, you know.
And you live the rules.
Yes. You live the rules more in the MTC than you do in the mission field. Like, they are super...
Because people are always watching you.
Yeah, they are super strict with the rules there. Because they know that if they don't follow the rules very strictly in the MTC, and you start getting these missionaries slacking off, that's going to be even worse in the mission field. Yeah, and missionaries they're all about keeping each other in line. Let's see. We also meet Dalton, Elder Dalton, who we learned in the introduction thing, their summary, that he has cancer.
And he's 29.
He's 29, which is really old. I've never actually heard of a male missionary being 29. I've heard of a few sister missionaries being that old.
Yeah.
But I do think that 29 is the cutoff. I think that once you're 30, you can't go on a mission.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, because then you're in part of the young single, or not the young single.
You're
adults.
the old single
old
adults.
Single adults. Yeah, like you're in just the regular single adults ward.
Well, I think you enter that when you're 31.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, I think it's 31.
Right. So if you go on a mission at 29, you come back at 31, and then you go to the regular single adult ward. There you go.
Did it, like, the way they described Dalton, did it sound like he's, like, I mean, lifetime missionary is an over-exaggeration, but, like, did it seem like he had just been out in the mission field for a long time?
Yes. Well, he says later on in the movie that all of the people that he started his mission with are now zone leaders or assistants to the president, like higher-ranking missionaries, which implies that he's been out there for at least a year, year and a half, probably close to 2 years, which is when a mission ends. And so, but he just always ends up having to train the new missionaries. He just keeps training and training and training, and he feels like he's never moving up in the ranks in the hierarchy, which is something that is actually pretty common. A lot of missionaries feel like they never move up in the hierarchy, and that can become sort of well, it's a status thing.
Yeah, and you kind of question your worthiness, right? Right,
you question your worthiness, your abilities. It makes you wonder how the mission president sees you as a missionary. Because if all you're doing, if the highest rank, so to speak, that you get as a missionary is that you just train the new missionaries, then that usually means that the mission president doesn't think very highly of your abilities as a missionary.
Which is kind of weird if you think about it, because if he's trusting you to train the new ones, like, shouldn't that mean, hey, you're a good missionary?
Right, but if he... I see your point, but if... it's also not uncommon for a zone leader to also train.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Like, he only trained.
Okay.
He never moved up. He just only trained. Anyway. So he's a 29-year-old. He's a senior companion. Before they go home from being picked up at the airport, Elder Dalton decides to just go straight to, tracting. Door knocking.
Makes him carry his own bags across Los Angeles.
Going door to door, knocking, asking people to talk about Mormonism.
Yeah.
Which really is the bulk of being a missionary, is door-to-door salesmanship.
Yeah. They've kind of changed that now, I think. They're not really allowed to go tracting anymore.
They're not allowed?
I don't know if allowed is the right word, but it's not what they really do anymore.
It's not their focus?
Yeah. I can't...
Well, I've heard that they're focusing more on retention and...
In the last couple of years, that's been the change, but quite a while ago, I feel like they kind of stopped doing tracting because they weren't getting anywhere with it.
Well, yeah, it's awful.
Yeah.
It's the worst experience.
That was one of the biggest reasons why I didn't want to be a missionary. Minus having to wear a dress every day.
Yeah. Like some of my most... I do have a few funny stories about tracting and just going door to door, trying to talk to people. But most of the time, it's just dead end after dead end after dead end.
And then you have to do it in the elements, like...
Oh, yeah. Like there was one time when we were tracting. So I served 2 years in Bulgaria. I went at the end of 2000, so when this movie had been out for a few months. And so I never actually watched the movie, but I knew some people who had watched the movie, and they kind of told me about it and talked about some of the things they like and don't like, and we can talk about that later. But so that it kind of shaped a little bit of how I viewed things like anti-Mormon materials and stuff like that, just by talking to the people that had seen this movie, and like the way that they portray it in this movie. Anyway, so so I was with a companion, and it was in the middle of winter in Bulgaria, super cold, tons of snow. And periodically they have power outages. And so we were tracting this building. And the way that they have their apartment buildings is you have these like little foyer areas that are enclosed, and then they have indoor stairwells that go up like 3 or 4 stories. So some buildings are like 25 stories, and you just go all the way up and then come all the way back down. And we were in this one stairwell with probably like 3 or 4 stories, Okay, and we were just coming all the way down, but the lights were off. Okay, so the people that we would knock on the doors for would look through the peephole and not see anybody. Okay, and in our minds, we're just innocent, naive American boys in a foreign country just doing our missionary work. Like, we don't think anything of it. But from the minds of these poor people in Bulgaria, oh my goodness, there's some strange person with a weird accent knocking on my door and the lights are off. So anyway, so we knock on this one door, and it's clearly an elderly lady, and she's just kind of terrified.
She opened the door?
No. But she would talk to us.
Oh, okay.
She talked to us, and she was like, "Who are you? I don't know who you are. I can't see you." Like that kind of thing. And she was very hysterical and all that. And so we just kind of leave her. It's like, "Oh, sorry to bother you. We're just going to go." And so we just go down to the next floor. And by the time we get down to the bottom floor, there's 2 police officers waiting for us.
Oh my gosh.
And the police officers initially were very intimidating. Like, what are you doing? Like, you guys shouldn't be here, and blah blah blah. And like, where are your passports and that kind of thing. And as soon as they got us into the police car, it was, come on, guys, don't be stupid. Like, what were you thinking? Like, they were just putting up a show for the lady because she was hysterical, and they didn't want her to like call back or complain, that kind of thing. Make it look like they're doing their job. They just took us to the police station, checked our passports, and then let us go. It's like, come on, guys, be smarter than this. And really, it was pretty stupid of us.
That's funny.
Anyway, so they're going tracting, and Dalton and Alan are tracting. They're going door to door. They have a couple of interesting interactions. Dalton tries to get Alan to do their missionary pitch a few times, and of course it doesn't go very well. They get doors slammed in their face and all that kind of thing. And then they get to a door, and it's like dark at night. And
it's a pink door, by the way. Did you notice that?
I didn't
notice.
A
bubblegum pink.
And this black guy opens the door, and he's just so pissed off and just irritated that they keep knocking on the door, and he keeps saying like this is harassment. Like, why do you guys keep coming here? I keep telling you to stop coming here. And it turns into this altercation with Elder Dalton. Okay, and the guy says that he's just going to go get his gun, and Elder Dalton like kind of pushes his way through the door, and they get inside, and they grab Alan and like throw him in there and say, "Teach him the gospel," and that kind of thing. And it turns out that this was all a prank, that the black guy was another one of the missionaries, and then they all took his picture for the reaction, and they all had a good laugh, and it was super funny.
Super funny.
It actually would have been kind of funny if that had happened in a real situation.
It's just so mean. I've never understood pranks like that.
Yeah. Well, I actually had a prank done to me on my first day.
Yeah.
Did I tell you about that?
I don't know.
Okay, so I get into the country, and the first day we sleep in the mission home, okay, where the mission president lives.
Okay.
Which in our case, if I remember correctly, was it used to be owned by the Chinese consulate. So we bought it, the church bought it, and then refurbished it, and that's where the mission home was.
Okay.
So the old Chinese consulate. Anyway, so we slept there for the first night, and then the second day, we all went off to our respective areas, which for me meant that I took a bus by myself to a city that was like 4 hours away or something like that.
By yourself?
Right. And that's pretty common, actually. There's a lot of that kind of thing happen. What was it by myself? Yeah, I was by myself. Anyway, so I get to the bus station, and I just stand there, just kind of stupidly. No, I'm getting this mixed up. I did meet my my first companion the second day, and he took me. I'm mixing it up with my first transfer, where I traveled by myself. Okay, so I did actually have my first companion coming. He came and got me in Sofia, the capital, and took me to Haskovo, which is where my area was going to be. Okay, that's what happened. And so we get to Haskovo, and my companion takes me to our apartment. Okay, and it's like kind of late at night. I'm like super jet lagged, and I just feel just out of it. Okay, and I walk into the apartment, and the other two missionaries are there. They don't live with us. Okay, they have their own apartment because Bulgaria is pretty spread out. But they were at our apartment. They were there to like greet us, kind of thing, and just meet the new guy.
Okay,
and we're talking, and then they point to the wall and just say how interesting it is that, you know, that this other missionary had gotten this particular calendar or something like that. And so I look at it, and, you know, it's like a swimsuit edition kind of thing, and there's like, you know, naked women and stuff on it, and
like real naked women on there.
Yeah, they gotten like a pornographic calendar, put it on the wall. It's a prank. And the reason why this is so funny is one, Mormons are super uptight about pornography. And this was like 2000, so it was starting to become a really big deal with the internet and all that. And so you hear about it all the time in general conference, right? And the other thing that's really funny about that is that in Bulgaria, there's pornography everywhere. Like, it is literally everywhere. It's every bus stop, every street corner. It's all over the place. And you kind of become desensitized to it. So these guys are basically saying, get used to it.
That's
like
funny.
There's porn everywhere.
Do you remember how you reacted?
I was just like, oh, that's interesting. I was so tired. I didn't give them the reaction that they were looking for. And so they just
That doesn't surprise me anyway. You're always very apathetic with things like that. It's like,
oh.
I know you're looking for reaction, and I'm not going to give it to you.
Well, I was just legitimately tired.
I know, but even if you hadn't been, like, I can see that happening.
Yeah.
And then worrying about it later.
Yeah. Anyway.
That's funny.
So that was my experience with...
So they bought pornography with their mission money.
Technically, yes. Yeah.
That's the part that I like.
It was funny.
It's funny.
Looking back, it's pretty funny.
Oh, man.
So in their apartment in the movie, they have 6 elders living together, which is actually pretty common, I've heard. I've heard a lot of different people talk about that.
Yeah, I don't know.
That wasn't the case in my mission.
They had 2 of them living in the living room, though, like that very front room. Did you notice that?
Oh, yeah, they had a bunk bed there.
Yeah, the bunk bed and the single bed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they want to make it look like it's this, you know, hard life that they're living.
They're poor. They call themselves beggars a couple of times in there.
Right, but that's not the case with all missionaries.
Right.
In my mission, we actually had relatively nice apartments because we're Americans and we can afford it.
Right.
You know, and so we actually got pretty decent apartments most of the time. I did have one apartment that we had a cockroach infestation, but that's because the missionaries before us didn't take care of the apartment. They didn't clean
there was crap all over the place.
They left the apartment. They left the apartment a month before we moved in, so it had like a month to
just
fester.
festered.
Yeah, exactly. So it took us a while to clean that place up.
Gross.
Yeah, there's like half an inch of sludge in the bathroom, like all along the bathroom floor. And in this, it's really common in Bulgaria, at least at the time, for the shower to just be a spigot on the wall and then drain on the floor and be like right next to the toilet. Not have like a tub or a designated shower area. Like it's just open. You know?
Okay.
And so that was the case with this bathroom. And so there's and I think that's why it was so sludgy, because it's, you know, a lot of like soap grime and that kind of thing.
All the buildup.
Right. Yeah, that was probably my grossest apartment.
That is gross. Did you shower with sandals on all the time?
For the first couple days until we got it nice and clean, yeah. Because again, we had a cockroach problem, so that was priority number 1.
Yeah. Oh man.
But that was rare for me. Like, most of our apartments were actually pretty nice. We had decent floors. We had one apartment that had a really nice heater, like half the size of our couch, and so we would just, you know, run the bill up, basically. It's middle of winter, freezing cold.
Ugh.
You know. Anyway, so in the apartment in the movie, there's 6 elders, and we learn, like, on the first morning, so after Elder Allen decides to stay, we learn that one of the other elders there is reading some anti-Mormon books.
Yes.
Which is one of my favorite parts in this movie.
Yeah, I was taken by surprise. Like, I had seen this movie before. This is Matt's first time. This is, like, my 10th time.
Oh, 10th? You've seen it a few times.
Yeah. Well, because this was one of the few LDS movies that I liked, and so I could stomach watching it multiple times, you know, on Sunday or something like that.
Yeah.
So, but I don't remember that. Like, I was so surprised. lost when he started talking about horses in America and how it's been proven that there weren't any horses before Columbus.
Yeah, and the response that the other missionaries give, at least in that particular instance, is you need to stop reading that crap.
Yeah, it's like, whoa, you're still reading that crap, man? Why are you still reading that? That's just as bad as pornography.
Yeah, that's exactly what they said. It's just as destructive.
Yeah.
Well, what I think is testimony.
What I think is interesting too is the elder that's reading the quote anti-Mormon literature is like really uptight. Like he's always complaining about how juvenile his companions are.
Right.
And so you would expect him to be more like Dalton, but he ends up being not like Dalton at all.
I think that's actually a pretty accurate portrayal of some people that I know. Like
I guess that's true. Trying to buckle down.
It's the double down effect, right? You have these people that have their doubts,
right?
And they try really hard to be super righteous and follow all of the rules as well as they can, and they kind of look down their noses at people that take the church a little bit more lightly, okay? But eventually, for some of these people, their doubts just become too much, and that becomes the case for Elder Dalton in the movie.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, and I think that's actually more common than people realize. That kind of thing, I think, happens a lot. Anyway, so one of the books that he's reading is called The Truth Behind the Mormons.
Do you think that's a real book?
I'm fairly certain it is a book. Do you want to look it up?
I will look it up right now.
Okay, go look it up.
Because I was wondering if they would actually put real, quote, anti-Mormon literature in there.
Right. But the interesting thing about it, like you have the horses in the Americas not corroborating with what the Book of Mormon says. Okay, so the Book of Mormon says that there are horses between, when is it? 2200 BC to 480. Okay, that's when they say that there's horses in America. But we know through the archaeological record and paleontology that actually isn't the case. Like there were no horses in the Americas during that time period. Okay, and so this book, this anti-Mormon book, points this out, and the good devout Mormons are basically saying, just ignore that. Like, stop reading that. Like, why are you reading science? Why are you reading scientific information that contradicts the Book of Mormon? That's going to challenge your testimony.
Yeah. They never say that it's science, though. They're very careful about how they condemn him for reading that stuff.
Right. But the implication is you need to worry more about scriptures than the learning of men.
Right, and Dalton at one point even says, why don't you use our own books to find the answers you're looking for? Right. And then he can't eat his chocolate shake. Because he's just so upset.
So mad. Anyway. Let's see, we already talked about the whole it's bad as pornography thing. There was another incident. I think it was the same conversation because they were still in the restaurant when they were talking about this. Oh no, the second incident was in the restaurant. The first incident was in their apartment.
Yeah.
The second incident was about the multiple First Vision accounts and how the church has always kind of brushed that under the rug and never really acknowledged the fact that Joseph Smith gave different accounts of the First Vision, some of which are contradictory. So we've talked about this before on the show, where the traditional Mormon view of the First Vision is that God the Father and Jesus Christ appeared to Joseph Smith, and they told him that he was going to start his own church and that all the other churches are wrong and all that kind of thing. But if you look at the different accounts, sometimes it doesn't mention God or Jesus. Sometimes it's just an angel or multiple angels. And they have different things that they tell him, like different motivations. Like one time it's not anything about other churches being wrong or starting your own church. It's about him receiving forgiveness for his sins. And, and you can go through, like there's charts all over the place that bring to light these contradictions.
Yeah, the CES letter.
Right, but
a good graphic for that.
Oh, yeah. And but Elder Dalton's response is, it's all lies. The early church leaders talked about these sorts of things, and the only differences are because he was talking to different people and they had a different perspective and that kind of thing. It's like, I'm sorry, but when in one account he says he saw Jesus and God the Father, and in another account he says he saw only Jesus, and in another account he says he only saw an angel, Those are contradictions.
Right.
They have different meanings
Right.
and different implications doctrinally. You know,
Yeah.
and you can't just sweep it under the rug by saying that it's all about the context and the perception of the different people he was talking to and that kind of thing. That's not good enough.
Right.
These are contradictions. He's changing his story,
Right.
and the Mormon Church is having a hard time acknowledging that. Although they do have
This
that,
was them acknowledging that.
this show, this movie.
Yeah, they're acknowledging that there were 4 different accounts.
Yeah. Well, there's actually,
But they don't
was
go
it
into
8?
detail what the 4 different accounts are.
No. But there was that essay, wasn't there? Didn't they do an essay on the First Division accounts? Or am I remembering that wrong? I can't remember. There
the
might
essays
be.
angered me, so I didn't read all of them.
Yeah. Anyway, they're trying to get ahead of the curve with a lot of the stuff that they've been whitewashing for years, but you know, they can't escape the fact that they've been whitewashing it for years.
Right.
You know.
Well, and Kinniger, he's the elder that is reading the anti-Mormon stuff. He says, I just thought that you guys would you would be more interested in learning more about the religion that you
Right.
believe in.
Right.
They just get really upset by that. But it is kind of true. You know,
Right.
It's like he is legitimately learning things about the religion,
He is.
but he's not using the resources that he's supposed to.
Right, which should tell you everything you need to know about the Mormon Church.
Exactly. And now I totally see that in this movie. But before, like, it's
Just
like,
went over your head. Did you notice it?
yeah, well,
Yeah.
I'm sure, like, before, too, like, I mean, it's been a long time since I've seen this movie. So I would assume that even before, like, him reading anti-Mormon literature, it's just another reason why I shouldn't even, like, contemplate reading anything.
Right, that's
You
why.
know?
That's
and
why
that's why they put it in.
Yeah, they put it in here because they show how it makes him struggle with his testimony.
Yeah.
He can't bring himself to believe all of the things that he is out in L.A. Trying to teach other people to believe, and he goes through a faith crisis and he leaves the mission.
Right.
Eventually. And that is one of the more genuine parts of this movie, I think, because it really does, I think, accurately portray what a faith crisis does. But they do it with the twist that you should avoid a faith crisis. You should avoid reading materials that are not approved by the church because it's so traumatic. It's going to be so painful for you, and it's all lies anyway. So why are you putting yourself through all of this trauma? You know, when in my case it was, oh my gosh, the church isn't true. I've been living a lie, and that's why it was traumatic. It's not because I've been deceived. I'm being undeceived.
Right. You're right. There is a LDS Gospel Topics essay about the First Vision.
Okay. And did you find out if that book really exists?
I couldn't find anything with that exact title. There were variations of the title.
Okay.
So
maybe that's what it was.
Yeah.
It was an homage, but they didn't want to give you a real reference.
Yeah, which is what I figured was what they were doing.
Yeah.
It's like they don't want to actually give you a book because someone somewhere was going to look that up.
Yeah.
And if they can't find it, then they can't read it.
And another thing about this whole anti-Mormon stuff being in this movie that I find so interesting is the guy who plays Elder Dalton. He's also the writer and director of this movie, and he's usually the writer and director of all of the movies he directs and is a part of. And usually he's also the star or one of the main main characters.
In there at least.
Right. And what's his name? Richard
Dutcher.
That's right. But the interesting thing about him is that just a couple years after this movie came out, he went through his own faith crisis. And so it's interesting to see him put this anti-Mormon stuff into this movie where he's playing a missionary who gets so upset about anti-Mormon literature and the fact that another missionary is reading anti-Mormon literature. It makes me wonder if this had something to do with his own faith crisis. You know what I mean? Like, did he include Horses in America and Blacks in the Priesthood and anti-Mormon books and stuff like that because that's something that he himself was struggling with? Maybe.
Maybe. So go listen to that Mormon Stories interview.
Yeah. So there's another podcast called Mormon Stories. It's by John DeLynn, and he actually interviewed Richard Dutcher. Why is it such a hard name to say?
It's not common.
Yeah. He interviewed him a few years ago, And it's up on YouTube, and it's also on their website, their podcast, Mormon Stories. And I listened to it a few years ago, and it was really interesting to hear his story and how he struggles with it, and the way that, in certain ways, he's been kind of shunned by the church that used to embrace him, which is kind of interesting.
Geez, why?
Right. Like
he did all this wonderful stuff for them and then left.
Yeah, and now he's kind of speaking out about it. And before he announced publicly that he had gone through this faith crisis, he had talked about doing a biopic on Joseph Smith, which, again, like, I haven't listened to the interview recently, but from what I can recall, he got a lot of support initially, and then after his faith crisis, he still wanted to do the movie, but with a little bit more
truth.
A little more truth. Talking about the controversial histories, the different accounts of the first vision, polygamy.
His polygamy.
That kind of stuff. Like, he wanted to do an accurate biopic of Joseph Smith's life and how he started the Mormon church. Mm-hmm. And now the church is putting up all these roadblocks and making it really difficult for him to get that project going. So I don't know if he's even started any sort of filming or anything with
his IMDb
with that movie.
Page didn't look like anything was moving forward with
that. Because I would imagine that it would be extremely difficult for anybody outside of the church to do that movie.
Yeah.
Anyway.
They made their own Joseph Smith movie.
Yeah.
Which you haven't seen, right?
I don't think so. They've done a few movies about Joseph Smith.
You should watch that one.
When did it come out?
I think I was in college when that one came out.
Yeah.
Because it was after Testaments. I can't remember, honestly. Okay. I did go and see it a few times, so at the Legacy Theater.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I may have actually still been in high school. We may have seen that as a young men's project or
so it came out like
activity.
10 years ago?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I don't think I ever watched that one. Anyway.
I would be interested to watch that one again now.
See what it is they leave out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because, most of the church depictions of Joseph Smith is when he's a lot younger, and you only get, like, the first vision, basically, with little snippets. And that one focuses more on his later life, and so it's a little more... I remember it being a little more gritty, which is funny to say, being a Mormon movie.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure it's not like that at all, but it was different.
They have, like, the mobs trying to tar and feather him and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Interesting. So... I feel like we've kind
of veered.
We kind of veered. So I was trying to get to a funny point. So they're in.
Oh, sorry.
They're in. They're in this cafe, right? Like on their second day or whatever, and one of the missionaries starts kind of sort of flirting with the waitress. Okay, which leads to a fun conversation. But I think it was Dalton that made the comment, and this is a comment that I actually remember people saying on my mission.
Oh, really?
If you don't look once, you're not a man. If you look twice, you're not a missionary.
And then they ask, how many times did you look?
Right. And didn't he just give like a big long stare? Oh, I'm still looking the first time.
Yeah, Dalton and Alan were like once, and Sandoval's like, I'm still looking my first time.
Right. And then he more or less kind of insinuates that he wants to marry her, so that was fun. Which just reminds me of a few people that I went on my mission with who kind of got mixed up with some of the local members there. Some of them weren't even members, actually. They got tied up with investigators, which at the time made me really upset. I can recall one specific incident where an elder was being transferred to a new area, and he had been kind of sort of flirting with an investigator that we were teaching, and so he got a taxi cab and got her to ride with him to the bus station, and they like held hands or something along those lines.
Oh, which is that's so cute.
Which is it's a perfectly natural thing.
Yeah, it is pretty innocent, actually.
And if it was in any other context, it would have been absolutely fine.
Yeah.
You
make fun of him for a while, and then it's like,
Right, but mixing yourself up in that kind of way and having that kind of physical contact as a Mormon missionary is a big no-no.
Yeah.
And so as a result of this happening, and rumors started flying about what was actually going on behind the scenes and all that kind of thing, a lot of missionaries started giving this other missionary a really hard time. And even I remember feeling just like disgusted by him, just like, I can't believe you would do that kind of thing. Because again, it's totally against the Mormon missionary rules. It's just funny, like looking back at it.
Yeah. Did you ever have parents trying to pair you up with their daughter so that they could go back to America?
Yeah. Actually, more common than that was when we would go tracting. So knocking on doors, people would open the doors, and usually the only people that would engage in a conversation with us would be older women, like their 60s, 70s, who wanted us to marry their granddaughters and take them to America. Those were the most common conversations we would have.
Oh, poor people.
Yeah. Oh, you can get my granddaughter out of this godforsaken country.
Sad.
Oh, there was one other thing. I think this was in the cafe. So Dalton, responds to Kinniger's, anti-Mormon lies with a few apologetic statements, and he says that they're all lies and he needs to study from church-approved books. And then Dalton says, there are drugs and there are starving people all around the world. Don't they have something better to do than to tear down the faith of others?
So pay attention to real problems.
Right. Which is interesting for a few reasons. One, don't you, as a missionary, have something better to do than to knock on other people's doors and try to convince them that their faith is wrong and that your faith is right? Because you're essentially tearing down their faith and then trying to give them a substitute. It's like, it's kind of the same thing.
And when they reject your teaching, you're sending them to hell.
Right. Exactly. And the other thing is that this is a very common attack against atheists who speak up about their doubts and try to support other people who are going through faith crisis. Why are you tearing down the faith of others? Why are you talking bad about the things that I believe? That's something that I've heard recently on Facebook. It's like, it's not about you. I don't care what you specifically believe, as long as you're not hurting people and you're not trying to convince me that I'm wrong and that I should accept unsubstantiated nonsense for no good reason. But what I'm reaching, or who I'm trying to reach on Facebook specifically, are friends and family of mine who are going through a faith crisis. And I just post things about my doubts and things that I find ridiculous about various religious beliefs, just to kind of let them know that
hey, you have an advocate.
Exactly. Like, there's somebody out there that that has gone through it, has a different opinion, and you can talk to or reach out to and that kind of thing. Like, that's, at least with Facebook, that's my goal.
Right.
And I've been accused of just being disrespectful and all that kind of fun thing. Anyway. Let's see. So we also meet another investigator, a guy named Brother Rose.
Oh, yeah.
I think this was still
well,
on the
we missed
first
the
day.
Catholic family. Catholic family came before Brother Rose.
Yeah, I didn't get to them until later in my notes, after they'd come up a couple times. But Brother Rose is an investigator who kind of sort of believes that the Mormon Church is true, but isn't very committal. And so he still drinks coffee. And as a result, he cannot be baptized because drinking coffee is against the word of wisdom.
So I have a question real quick.
Okay.
If you had met a man like Brother Rose who basically believed in everything but couldn't give up the coffee, you still wouldn't be able to baptize him at all? Or could you
technically
baptize him and then...
Well, that's the thing.
Like, is that in the mission book?
It's technically, they need to be clean and pure and following all of the temple ordinance rules, right? Which includes no smoking, no drinking alcohol, no illicit drugs, no coffee or black tea, and no extramarital sex, those kinds of things.
Okay.
So that's what's supposed to happen. I'm sure that there are people somewhere, like in missions, that let the coffee thing slide because it's fairly, mundane.
Yeah.
But I've never had that experience. Ultimately, if you find out that a particular individual is drinking coffee and still wants to be baptized, you have to let the mission president know that they're still drinking coffee, and then the mission president would give the stamp of approval or not.
Okay.
So yeah, okay. It's the mission president's call, really.
Oh, okay. So it could happen.
It could happen. I've never
It's
heard
just
of
not
it.
Very
yeah,
common.
I've never heard of it.
Okay.
So, but yeah, just anytime that you're thinking, wondering whether or not leaving the Mormon Church was the right thing to do, just keep in mind that they say that there are eternal consequences
for drinking coffee.
For drinking coffee.
Yeah, that's why now watching the movie, I'm like, they won't baptize him just because he drinks coffee.
Right. It's like not letting somebody join the Islam or one of the Jewish sects because they eat ham sandwiches and they just can't give up their ham. It's the same kind of thing. It's a dietary restriction, and they expect you to give up this particular thing just because it's a religious prohibition. Like, there's no reason for it. It's just a religious prohibition.
Right.
And they're going to deny you eternal salvation because you like pork or coffee. Silly.
I was going to say it's like a baseball player not being able to hit left-handed and them not allowing him to be on a baseball team because of that.
Yeah.
Because that's not a common thing.
Yeah, it's just silly. There's no real reason for it. Yeah. Anyway, we also meet a young man named Benny who is crippled. Did they ever say what his ailment is?
No, but
it comes across as like cerebral palsy or something along those lines.
Kind of just drags his feet behind him as he walks with his crutches.
He reminds me of Walter Jr. on Breaking Bad.
Yeah, Walter Jr. was a lot more convincing.
Well, wasn't Walter Jr. actually partially crippled?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's what I thought. So this young man is about to be baptized, and so Elder Dalton has to do like interviews with him and
his final interview or whatever.
Yeah, and make sure that he's ready to be baptized and take the covenants with God super seriously.
Okay, so I want to talk about that.
Okay.
Just because, so he says we need this interview is to go over the covenants, make sure you understand them, make sure you're worthy to, be baptized, and then it cuts out.
Uh-huh.
And then it resumes after they've already talked about that.
Right.
But what are the baptismal covenants?
It's what I just said. Well, I mean, not just what I just said. So they talk about the things like following the word of wisdom, following the law of chastity, and then, giving all of your time and talents to the Lord, and like being a good Mormon, and repenting and not doing bad things. Like it's a little bit more of a softer version of the temple interview.
Okay, so when you turned 8 and were about to be baptized, did you know those covenants?
No.
Yeah. Like
no idea.
I mean, even afterwards, like when people, said, you're renewing your baptismal covenants, like when you take the sacrament, it's like, well, what were my covenants? Like, you don't learn any of that in church.
Yeah. It's
I was never
stuff.
asked those questions until I started going to the temple.
Yeah, they are pretty generic. We could probably look them up. I'm sure there's.
But that's
somewhere.
the thing. Like, I feel like I've done that before, and I can't find an answer. Like baptism, it's always so general.
Yeah. Don't you have a copy of the missionary discussions?
I have Preach My Gospel.
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the missionary discussions there. They probably would have the baptismal questions in there somewhere. When I was a missionary, we used something different. It wasn't the Preach My Gospel. They were just the 6 discussions. And so it was a little bit different, but I'm pretty sure that the questions would be in there somewhere. Anyway, so Benny has a crippling disease, and he wants to be baptized, and he kind of comes and goes. He plays a much more important role later in the movie. Are you looking it up?
So it's just being baptized shows that we want to keep his commandments. Some of the promises we make when we are baptized are that we are willing to take upon ourselves the name of Jesus Christ, that we will always remember him, and that we will keep his commandments. That sounds familiar.
Okay.
But still.
Well, that's even more generic.
That's still even more generic.
Yeah. That's as generic as the sacrament covenants.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. Sorry. Slight digression.
Okay.
But that always bothers me when they talk about the covenants, but they never actually talk about the covenants.
They don't say what the covenants are. Yeah. They're not explicit. So we have an incident where Elder Dalton has a seizure during the night. Okay. And this is when you learn that Elder Dalton has been struggling with cancer. He had a brain tumor, and then they took most of it out, not all of it.
They couldn't get all of it.
They couldn't get all of it, but there was the bits that were still in his head were in remission, meaning they weren't growing. And so this is like his first seizure, I guess, since then. This is kind of how they play it. Anyway, so the elders, wake up and they see this happening, and they instantly give him a priesthood blessing, and then they call an ambulance.
Wait.
Yes.
Oh, we need to stop and talk about this blessing.
Yes.
Okay, so Kinniger is the one that starts to give the blessing. Did you notice that?
Yes.
He has the oil, but then he's unable to give the blessing. He freezes, and then they take over for him.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's something that needs to be talked about.
Right. So in Mormon culture, priesthood men, people, men who hold the priesthood, are able to give blessings in the name of God, which is what this was. And they have like this caveat that if you aren't worthy, if you have doubts, or if you've done some kind of sin, like a really common one is sexual immorality, then you are unworthy to give the blessing. And if that's the case, then you should let somebody else give the blessing. And it's one of the ways that they try to guilt trip people into following things like the law of chastity by making it sound like you got to be ready at any moment to give somebody a blessing. Like, what if you are looking at porn one day and you don't repent, and then the next day your mom has a heart attack and you're not able to save her with the priesthood? Those kinds of lessons, I remember that happening.
Oh, yeah.
And it messes with your head.
Yeah.
Big time.
They guilt trip you into turning yourself in for something that's not really a crime.
Right. Yeah. And they'd play it out to be like, don't you want to save your mom?
Yeah.
If she has a heart attack, wouldn't you like to be able to save your mom? Those kinds of things. It drives me crazy, remembering those kinds of conversations and lessons, like Sunday school lessons and stuff. Anyway, so they give him the priesthood blessing. Dalton feels super unworthy, so he backs away.
Kinniger. Dalton's the one having the seizure.
So Kinniger backs away and lets one of the other guys give the blessing. And then the ambulance comes, and do they show Dalton calm down? He kind of goes into like a mini coma.
He's just shaking. And then suddenly it cuts to them being in the ambulance.
Okay. So I've had a few experiences like this.
Yes, me too.
I believe that I've mentioned them before.
Yeah.
And one in particular.
Yeah,
I've talked about that one before, and I'm pretty sure I've talked about the other one that was actually on my mission.
Oh, yeah. About that
where we had this guy who had epilepsy, and he had an epileptic seizure during one of our church activities, and the missionaries rushed to him and gave him a blessing and all this kind of thing, and 2 minutes later he snaps out of it. He's on his feet. He was very apologetic and goes home and that kind of thing. And in our minds as missionaries, it's, oh my gosh, we just saved this man's life. We just used the power of God, to stop a seizure. And it wasn't until a few years later that I had learned a thing or two about seizures and that kind of stuff that I learned that seizures just kind of end after a couple of minutes. 2 to 3 minutes is pretty standard for a seizure. And so, especially for like an epileptic seizure, anyway, so it would have happened either way.
Yeah.
Whether we had given him a blessing or not, his seizure would have stopped after a couple of minutes. But in our minds, oh my gosh, we just used the power of God.
Right.
And it's the same kind of thing with this scene where they give Dalton a blessing and then they take him to the hospital and all that, and he starts to get better and whatnot. They don't really talk about it, but the implication is that the blessing did something to help him, because when they take him from the ambulance to the hospital, he's no longer in a seizure,
right?
But they don't dwell on it that much in the movie because later they get to do another blessing.
Yeah.
And that one's even more impressive.
That's the big miracle.
Yes, that one is very impressive.
I don't think they could really talk about the other one, though, because they've already said that Dalton's going to die. He only has a few months left. Yeah.
But his seizure stopped.
Yeah. I think that priesthood blessing was more just to ease the suffering. You know?
Yeah.
Because they all already know he's going to die.
Yeah. Anyway, so this is how Elder Allen finds out that Dalton has a brain tumor and his whole medical history thing, and that he's going to die in a couple of months. And he has a conversation with the mission president. And the mission president, or he says, like, why don't you send him home? Like, why are you keeping him here? Like, shouldn't he be with his family? That kind of thing. Like, he's going to die. Like, why is he here? And the mission president's response is, he won't go. He wants to stay.
We've tried sending him, and he just won't leave.
He just won't leave. It's like, as a mission president, you can actually send him home.
Okay, and I have another question, and you might not know the answer to this. But someone has such a life-threatening disease, would the general authorities actually send him out into the mission field? Because, I never served a mission. Right. I never went through that whole process. But talking with my guy friends that did serve missions, I always heard that if you have some kind of medical condition, they won't send you outside of the United States because getting medication is too difficult, which makes sense. So in my head, it follows that if you have brain tumors or cancer, they're not going to send you on a full 2-year mission. It would be more of a stake assigned mission.
Right. Local.
Yeah, a local mission. Because one of my brother's friends couldn't serve a mission because he had or a full-time mission because he had some strong form of ADHD or something like that. He formed a stake mission and just did a whole bunch of stuff online.
The only reason why I could see them making an exception and where this movie would actually be plausible is that his tumor was in remission. So it wasn't growing, it wasn't getting worse. There was no reason for them to suppose that he was just going to up and die.
Okay.
So, but you're right, that is pretty common for them to not send somebody out if they have a really serious medical condition.
Yeah. I think they try and make it more convincing, too, because the top cancer institute in the U.S. is supposed to be in Los Angeles or something. But still.
Right, which is
I
something
feel like it still
wouldn't
have happened.
Saying.
Yeah. In real life.
Yeah, it probably wouldn't have. But anyway, this isn't...
Sorry, things like that just really bother me in movies.
But, this movie isn't about realism. It's about bolstering faith.
Yeah. It is still more realistic than a lot of LDS movies, though.
That's true. And I
Minus
guess
the final miracle at the end.
I guess we should say that the caliber of the acting and the writing for this movie is much, much higher than a lot of religious films that are out there and a lot of the ones that we've done reviews for.
Yeah, I think this movie opened the doors for LDS film to be a lot better than what it was before.
Was this the first one from the early 2000s?
I think so.
Because
it's before The Work and the Glory. It's before Singles Ward. It's before
the RM.
The RM and all those. This was the first one. I feel like the first half decent movie.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can't think of one that was before it.
I can't either. I mean, the only other really good one that I liked was Legacy.
But that was made by the church.
Yeah.
Yeah. This one is just made by a member of the church,
yeah.
And he did it all independent and all that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so anything else to say about the seizure or the tumor until we get to the end?
No.
Okay. Let's see. There were a few rather interesting meetings that they had that are kind of fun to talk about. One, they meet with a guy, a very burly, bearded man who has a bunch of kids crying out in the backyard, and his wife is nagging him to do a bunch of chores and
why isn't the garbage taken out?
Right. And the missionaries tell him about how awesome it is that in Mormonism your family can be eternal. And if he joins their church and he is worthy, then he gets to have his family forever and ever, and it's going to be wonderful and joyous and all of that kind of thing. And this is, common teaching in Mormonism. Like this kind of thing comes up every single Sunday.
I do have another question.
He says when they're telling him about the eternal families, and he's got his kids crying and his wife nagging him, he responds, "I really don't think I'm interested."
Yeah. So let me get this straight. After I die, I'll still be with my family.
Right. And I just wrote down in my notes, this inadvertently exposes the way that Mormonism exploits family to lock people into the church.
Oh, totally. That's funny. Yeah. I do have a question, though. What's in the first discussion? What do you talk about in the first discussion?
First discussion is basically just the first vision of Joseph Smith and just giving them a Book of Mormon with like a couple of passages to read.
Mm-hmm. So on the first meeting with someone, would you talk about eternal families?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
I mean, it is kind of a core tenet of the church. So, I mean, and it is something that on the surface for a lot of people sounds like a wonderful thing.
Right.
Especially to like, young Mormon families, which is who they're trying to lock in.
Right.
So lots of people probably do bring up eternal families in the first meeting. As like, hey, our church is awesome. Like, this is one of the awesome things we do. Isn't it awesome? That kind of thing.
Yeah. It just makes it obvious that these missionaries were not savvy to the situation around them.
Yeah, right. Because they're 19 years old. Yeah. Like, what on earth do they know about raising a family? Anyway. Let's see. There was another meeting that I thought was pretty interesting when Elder Allen goes on splits with the black elder. What was his name? Banks. And so they meet with some investigators that are a black couple, and right off the bat, the man just starts going off on how awful it is that up until 1978, the Mormon Church didn't allow black people to have the priesthood. Mm-hmm. And Banks, he gives his canned response and tries to give like some reasons, and then he basically says like it doesn't matter, like the church is true regardless, and that kind of thing.
God will give the authority when He wants to.
Right, it's God's authority; He'll give it to who He wants, like that kind of thing.
As long as you're a man.
Right, which is something that the wife points out, like, well, it's not just about the black people. Like, you guys don't give it to women either. Like, when are you going to give it to women?
Like, why can't a woman be a preacher?
Right. And of course, he doesn't have a good response to that. It's just the church is true.
Yeah, and no one does.
And so there's a reason. I just don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Like that kind of
His
thing.
response again is it's God's authority. He'll give it to who He sees fit.
Right.
I think this scene is one of the most real scenes in the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
because I have black people in my dad's side of the family, and this is the reason why they would not entertain joining the church.
And why should they?
Exactly. But, at the time it didn't really make sense to me, but I also didn't care because I was only like 9. But, I just think this is one of the most realistic scenes in the film.
Yeah, and it is a real concern that people have, and the church doesn't have a good reason for it.
No.
Like now, 16 years after this movie came out, they have the church essay that basically says, sorry, black people, Brigham Young was a racist. Yeah. And then all of the guys that followed Brigham Young were also kind of racist, and so they didn't change it until 1978.
Right.
Sorry. Like, that's more or less their response now. Yeah. But back then, 2000, they didn't have a good response. It was just, I don't know, it's just what God wanted.
Yeah.
And then he goes off on, like, the whole tribe of Lehi, or Levi, the Levites.
Yeah, the Levites.
One of the tribes of Israel, and they were the only ones who were allowed to have the priesthood in the ancient church and, like, the Old Testament. And so he's like, see, this has precedent,
Yeah.
It's like, it's not just discriminating against black people, like other people have been discriminated against too.
Right. Not everyone was allowed to have the authority of God even then. Right. And they were white.
Right. It's okay for God to discriminate as long as it's God.
Yeah. Because He's the one with the authority.
Right. It's I don't know, it just kind of reminds me of the atheist experience with Matt Dillahunty, where people will bring up the whole idea of, if you don't believe in God, then you're going to go to hell. So isn't it better just to believe, and that kind of thing? And his response is, an ant doesn't have the power to stop me from stepping on it. That doesn't make me, or that doesn't mean that I'm not a jerk for stepping on it. God can destroy me. He can torture me all he wants, but that doesn't mean that he's right in doing so. You know,
Okay.
it might does not make right, is the phrase.
Right.
And it's the same kind of thing. Just because God is being racist and discriminatory in his policies, in his true church, and because he's God, that doesn't mean that it's right. Just because he's God, you know, just because he has the power to do whatever he wants doesn't mean that whatever he wants to do and does is correct or moral, you know.
Yep.
Anyway, but after they have that conversation with the black couple, Banks and Alan are talking, like they're having lunch with all the other missionaries, and they're just kind of on the side talking to each other.
They're kind of depressed about the whole situation.
Right, because it's an awkward conversation to have. Like, and again, the church doesn't have a good response, and so they're struggling as missionaries for the church. They're struggling with, you know, how to deal with it. How do we talk to people about it? What is the right answer? Am I okay with this?
Right.
And Banks basically tells his story, how he was baptized and then sometime later found out about the priesthood ban. So he didn't even know that the priesthood ban was a thing until after he had already committed his life to the church.
Again, which I think is incredibly honest in this film, because that happens a lot.
Right. Yeah. Because the church intentionally withholds information from people so that they can't make an informed decision before they commit themselves to the church. Same thing with the temple. Before you go to the temple, you have to commit to following all of the things that you're going to commit to in the temple before you know what they are. Before you know what they are.
Yeah.
And then only after you have committed to doing all of the things in the temple will they let you go to the temple.
Right.
You know, it doesn't make any sense.
And then you find out about celestial marriage and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, so he's talking about how he didn't know, and
how he struggled with it.
And
looked for answers.
He was trying to find answers from different people. He was trying to read any source that he could, having conversations with anybody he could talk to, and he found a bunch of apologetic answers or whatever to try to justify the racism, but ultimately, what changed his mind or what kind of eased his soul was that he went to Carthage jail, which is where Joseph Smith was martyred, as Mormons like to say. Or murdered, which is probably a more accurate word. Anyway, so when you go to Carthage jail, there's Mormon missionaries there who kind of give you the synopsis of the events that transpired, and they tell you about Joseph Smith's death and all the things that happened, and they make it seem very morose and just really heavy. Okay. And a lot of Mormons, when they go there, have really deep spiritual experiences, similar, I suppose, to like somebody going to Mecca if you're a Muslim. Like it's a religious site that's significant to their specific religion. Okay, so he goes to this Carthage jail, goes through their little tour with some of his friends. It seemed like his friends weren't necessarily.
It sounded like an activity. It was a youth activity that he.
Oh, was
on.
it?
Yeah.
Okay. And while he's there, he feels the Spirit of God. And the way that he describes it is it feels like God's Spirit sat in his body. And because of that religious experience, none of the racism matters. It's all a test of faith.
Right. God
God gives you 100 reasons to believe, and then he gives you a couple of reasons not to believe so that you can make the choice to believe. Is how he describes it.
Yep.
Which would be fine, aside from
the fact that if you choose not to believe, he's going to damn you to hell.
Right. And the fact that there's more than just a couple reasons not to believe.
Right. And it's kind of flipped.
and that, of the 100 reasons that you have been given to believe, most of them are tenuous and flimsy and not logically tenable at all. And
none of them are factual.
Yeah.
Except that Joseph Smith was a real person.
Right. Like, really, you just have to accept it. That's really what it is.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we also have some sister missionaries, which brings a fun dynamic into the missionary experience, because these are sister missionaries who are a little bit older than the elder missionaries, which sounds funny because you call the boys elders, but they're the youngest. They're the youngest ones in the mission field.
It's funny.
So you have Sister Monson and Sister Franck.
Monson is a very Mormon name.
Yes. the current president of the church is Monson.
Yeah.
Which was kind of funny at the end when they say that she's, somehow miraculously made us secretary to a general authority.
Yeah.
Gee, I wonder why.
Because your last name's Monson.
Right. Anyway, so Sister Franck is very, very smart, very well-read.
And super condescending.
Towards Elder Allen.
For no reason.
For no reason.
He just sits down to talk, and she, right off the bat, judges him.
Yeah, as being a jock.
Yeah.
Who she doesn't respect.
Because he's blonde and skinny.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's not a big guy.
No.
He's a skinny white kid.
Yeah. Anyway, it creates a bit of a romantic tension, which is just kind of fun. Like, because, that kind of thing happens all the time in the mission. Mm-hmm. You have, they're young adults. Like, they're 19, 20, 21 years old. The oldest person in this movie is 29. Like, they're young, their libidos are high, their hormones are crazy, and they're supposed to be completely celibate during this whole mission experience. Completely celibate.
Yep.
And so when you have the sister missionaries in there, there's going to be some kind of sexual tension. Mm-hmm. And that was very much the case on my mission. There were, I guess I don't really have specific examples, but I can remember a few guys hitting on the sister missionaries and a few of the sister missionaries kind of reciprocating and that kind of thing. I'm sure if you do some digging on the ExMormon Reddit page, you can find lots of stories of sister missionaries and the elder missionaries hooking up, which is always fun to read.
A girl that I grew up with, her younger sister, who's only like a year younger than me, who's my sister's age actually, went on a mission and met her husband there on the same mission. And the husband left before her, and she decided that she was just too in love with him to stay on her mission any longer, and so she left early. And they got married like a couple months after she got home. Yeah, it was crazy.
Right, and in any other context, it would be completely normal and fine.
For what? Them to get married so early?
Just for them to, just elope, just get married.
Right.
It's a big deal because they were on their mission.
Right. So this has probably not as much to do with the movie, but that same couple, so they got pregnant really fast, but their son was born 3 months premature. And my mom made the comment that they just rushed into everything too fast and more or less implied that this was God's way of telling them that they did everything way too fast.
That's awful.
And I was like, huh. That doesn't make sense. That was before I was even entertaining any doubts. But
if that was the case, then pretty much anybody who gets married before they get, or has a baby before they get married, they're going to have a premature baby.
Right. Right. Yeah. I was like, right. But wouldn't he punish them even more? Their son is perfectly healthy and happy now. It's he doesn't have any adverse health effects because of it. He was just born early.
And why would they punish the son?
Yeah. Yeah. It's you're not really punishing, I don't know. Yeah. You're not punishing the right people.
Yeah. So anyway, Elder Allen and Sister Franck, they're sitting on a beach after a baptism, and Sister Franck tells Elder Allen about her super hard breakup with a returned missionary, and because of this experience, this is how she knows Mormonism is true.
Well, she went on her mission because she wanted to have the same strength in her testimony as her fiancé. Mm-hmm. She didn't really imply that they broke up. He just stopped writing her. Right,
but she took it hard. When he stopped writing her, that was...
I can't blame him for not writing her anymore. She left him 2 weeks before their wedding.
Yeah.
She brought that on herself.
Yeah, but it just shines the light on this whole idea that it's through the hardships that you come closer to God, right? It makes you dependent on a higher power to save you and make things right and all that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It's just kind of ridiculous, I think.
Also, that's the first time I've ever heard of a sister missionary choosing to not get married and to serve a mission. Usually it's the opposite for me. In my experience, girls that I grew up with all were about to serve missions. Like, papers turned in, they had where they were going, they had given their farewell talks, and then suddenly met some guy and decided they weren't going to go on their missions anymore.
I've heard a few experiences of this kind of thing, like Sister Franck, and where the guy goes on the mission and then the girl goes on the mission and then they get married. I've heard of that actually happening.
Oh, yeah. But not her deciding not to get married 2 weeks before and then deciding to go on a mission.
Not the 2 weeks before thing.
Yeah.
But it's
still... the she was about to get married and decided after that she wanted to actually go on a mission.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
That was weird to me. It's usually the opposite.
It's still really weird that they would wait for each other in the first place, you know.
That is unusual.
Yeah. And both of them would wait for each other.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, let's see. So Elder Dalton sets up a meeting with some prostitutes.
Only after they've read the book.
Only after they've read the book. Well, only one of them read the book.
But they live together, so he can't just say both of them have to.
Yeah, and she shares her favorite moment from the Book of Mormon, which is the story of Abinadi, who basically is martyred because he chastises the king.
Tells him to repent. And
all that kind of thing. And so it's this story of, like, you know, dying for your beliefs, and it's all about conviction and all that kind of thing. So there's certain, like, admirable qualities to the story, like looking up to him for his principles and that kind of stuff. But I don't know, like, the story of Abinadi is kind of messed up.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to really like that story too.
Yeah, because he has that super compelling speech right before he dies.
Right. And they kill him for his beliefs.
Yeah. It's a very clear martyr situation.
Yeah, being brought up in a religion, like, you're taught to kind of revere that. Like,
right.
That exactly. is the ultimate sacrifice that you can make. You die for your beliefs. Right,
because and that's part of what reinforces this idea that keeps coming up within Mormonism and within other religions as well. Like, there are lots of Christian churches that will say stuff similar to this, that they would rather die than betray their religious beliefs. Right. That kind of idea. And of course, in modern times, those sorts of things just don't happen. Unless, I guess, if you come across ISIS, maybe.
Yeah, not in the U.S., really.
Yeah. But this idea that you would just, take a bullet rather than say that you don't believe in God or that kind of thing, or say that you believe in a religion that you don't actually believe in, that kind of thing. It's absurd.
Yeah.
But they feel like if they can say honestly that they would rather die than betray their beliefs, that means that they're in God's good graces and they're on the right track for heaven.
Yeah,
and
it's
all
like a fast track to heaven if you die and don't forsake your beliefs.
But the problem with that, of course, is that that's the same mentality that terrorists have.
Yep.
They are dying for their beliefs. They believe that when they kill a bunch of infidels, they are going to go to heaven, and they're going to send the infidels to hell, and they're going to get, their virgins or whatever, or grapes, depending on who you talk to. And the only thing that somebody of another faith can say against their religion, this is something that Sam Harris points out, is that they're worshiping the wrong God. Because if they were worshiping the right God, what they were doing would be morally correct. And all they can do is say, you're worshiping the wrong God. That's the problem with justifying your morality with religion. Because it's not really just a justification. Anyway, so Elder Dalton sets up this meeting with the prostitutes, which is a funny exchange, of course.
Yeah.
Because they're clean-cut Mormon missionaries. And so the prostitutes go to their apartment and get ready for the meeting. This is like a couple days after they set up the appointment. And so they're cleaning all of their drugs and all of their sex toys and the
rushing around the apartment.
Yeah, the big whip on the wall, and they're wearing like super short shorts and like
tube tops.
Tube tops, yeah. And so still looking like prostitutes, but a little bit cleaner. And the doorbell rings, and so they get super excited, like, oh, the missionaries are here. We're going to talk to them, and like we've been waiting weeks for this sort of thing. We read that stupid book so that we could have this meeting, and these sister missionaries are at the door, which is actually a pretty common thing.
Yeah, I was going
with
to say,
missionaries.
isn't that like that would have had to have happened regardless, right?
Ideally, that's what is supposed to happen. But, as I said, I served in Bulgaria, and not every area had sister missionaries. And so, in those areas, you can't have the sister missionaries meet with all of the women that want to fraternize with the boys, And so the boys just have to go. And if something bad happens, the boys just have to leave.
Interesting.
And I remember, I've never really had anything like that happen to me. But I remember a few stories from like other missionaries in my mission where like they would go teach somebody like a girl that was interested, and she would be legitimately interested, but then her roommate would come out in her underwear and sit in on the conversation,
right.
just like with a bra or something like that, and the boys would be just super uncomfortable and try to find a reason to leave or set up a different appointment, that kind of thing. It's just funny. So let's talk about Kinniger, the final scene with Kinniger.
Okay.
So we've already talked about how he's kind of at the brink of a faith crisis. Okay. And this is one of the things that the movie actually portrays pretty accurately.
Oh.
So he's this distraught missionary. He's out trying to convince people to believe this thing that he's not entirely sure that he believes himself. Okay. And eventually it becomes too much. Like he's read so many people, like different books and things about how the Mormon Church is wrong, or how the history doesn't add up, or all of the problems that the Mormon Church has, and he just decides to leave. So he writes a note and he leaves his anti-Mormon books for Elder Allen to read, because he's the youngest one and he's already kind of showed that he has some doubts and that kind of thing. So he wants to help Elder Allen see the light, kind of thing. So he leaves in the middle of the night. Elder Dalton and Allen catch up to him at the bus station, similar to how the other missionaries caught up with Elder Allen. And Kinniger tells Allen to read the anti-Mormon books that he left. Elder Dalton gets super pissed off, and they kind of take a swing at each other. They kind of push each other. It's like this little scrap kind of thing or whatever. And Dalton loses his glasses. Anyway, so Dalton ends up having Kinniger like up against the wall, and they just start yelling at each other. Okay, so Dalton says that he knows that Kinniger knows that the church is true because he heard him say it. And this, of course, shows the importance of the heartfelt testimony within the Mormon Church. It's all about conviction. If you say it with enough conviction, that means that you really do believe it, or that you know it, and that's good enough for you to get into the temple and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Anyway, it's super important. And it's at this point that Kinniger admits that he was lying. He wasn't being honest when he said, I know the church is true. I know the Book of Mormon is true. He was just saying it. And they kind of leave it at that in the movie. But this is really common. Like this, at different times in my experience, happened to me, and I don't know. It's the sort of thing that is kind of refreshing to see them acknowledge in a movie like this. But I'm also disappointed that they didn't really get into it.
Right. But getting into it opens up a lot of doors that they aren't willing to go down.
Right. Right.
So it makes sense why they didn't.
Right. Again, it is refreshing to see them even acknowledge that this is a thing. I just wish they had done more with it. Anyway, so Dalton and Allen leave the bus station and they go to that cafe that they're so fond of.
Wait, hang on. There was another thing that Dalton said about all that literature. He tells Kinniger, don't you think that I've read all the books that you've read and more? Like he says that I've read everything that you've read and I've read more. Why do you think it took me 4 years to join the church? Which I think is... Yeah.
Well, it's like Elder Holland's response to critics. It's, well, these arguments have been around forever. I'm a really smart guy. I've read all of these books before too. And I still believe.
And I still believe, exactly. It's
the I still believe part that's so troubling.
Yeah, it's the belief. It outweighs the knowledge.
Well, the problem that I have with it is it doesn't resolve the concerns.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't even address the concerns.
Yeah.
It's saying, well, I have heard all of these arguments, and I don't have a problem with the church.
Right, so
why do you?
Yeah.
You know, it's really condescending, and it doesn't even address any of the issues. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, but it's super common.
Yeah. Smarter people than you believe in God.
Yeah.
Who are you to tell them that they're wrong?
Right.
Like, I'm not telling them that they're wrong. I'm saying that I have no reason to believe it.
Yeah.
Maybe they're right. I don't know. Why are they right?
Yeah.
Tell me why they're right. Anyway, so Dalton and Alan go to the cafe, and they have a conversation about personal conversion and prayer and faith and all this kind of stuff. And Dalton basically tells Alan that he can't convert Alan. Alan has to do it himself. It has to be a personal testimony. Yeah, personal conversion.
Which is really popular in the church.
Right.
You have to convert yourself.
Right. Which, I mean, I guess is true. Like, you have to make your own decision.
Yeah.
But if you ever come to the conclusion that the church is wrong, you aren't trying hard enough, or you did something wrong, or you've sinned, and so God isn't giving you the right answer.
Right.
Like, he's testing your faith, those kinds of things. It's like, yeah, there's always a way for them to weasel out of actually being accountable for any of the stuff they say. Anyway, so Alan decides that he's going to throw away the anti-Mormon books, okay? And he decides to start reading the scriptures more, like, intensely. And
this is
he
all
stays
in
up,
one night.
Right, so he stays up all night doing this. And he kneels down a few times to pray, and then he actually says, like, a prayer, kind of, sort of. And while he's saying this prayer, he has his conversion moment, okay, where he basically comes to an epiphany that Heavenly Father is his real father.
Right. Well, we should go back a little bit to when so Benny was supposed to get baptized on a Saturday, and he ends up not showing up to this baptism, and they wonder why, because he was so committed to this, and they can't find him anywhere. He's not at his house. But they have that conversation on the doorstep where Elder Allen says that he hasn't had much luck in the dad department because his biological dad just left. His stepdad is a child molester, and then Dalton tells him, well, at least your real father will always be there for you.
Right.
And has to kind of explain to him what he actually means by that. So that precedes him coming to the realization.
It's inception.
That God is his real father.
Yeah. Right, which is just another example of Mormons exploiting tragedy to convince them to join their church.
And it's a really hard thing to explain to children.
Right.
This concept that Heavenly Father is your real father.
Oh, yeah. We've talked about that before. You were a primary school teacher, right? And you
4-year-olds, and you have to tell them this.
Yeah.
And there's no way to explain that to a 4-year-old child, that you're the dad that you see every day, that you sit on his lap, you kiss him every night, is not your real dad. Like, how traumatizing is that?
Right. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. After trying to teach that one, that was when I stopped teaching the lessons the way they were supposed to be taught. Because those concepts, like, you can't explain that to a 4-year-old.
Right. And this is the epiphany that Alan has that convinces him that the church is true.
Yeah.
And he just doubles down and recommits to being a missionary and all that kind of thing.
Right. I just think it happens too fast in one night.
Yeah. Yeah. But, I mean, like, you hear about those stories all the time, Like, you read accounts from, like, the early church. Overnight conversions happened regularly.
I guess that's true.
Like Parley P. Pratt.
Yeah.
He did that. Like, he read the Book of Mormon, like, in 2 days straight, and then was converted. Like, that kind of thing. Yeah. Like, it's supposed to be one of those sorts of experiences.
Yeah.
And, but it also kind of sets up that expectation that you need that kind of experience in order to really believe that the church is true. And because those sorts of things are so freaking rare, because, let's be honest, most of them probably didn't even happen, you get all of these people going through the motions, trying really hard to have that experience so that they can really, really, for reals know that the church is true. And they never get it. And so they're in this cycle where they're constantly looking for it.
Yeah.
But they'll never get it. Anyway, anything else to say about Kinniger?
No.
Okay. Let's move on to the Morales family.
Okay.
So they are Catholic, Hispanic family. There's 2 daughters, right? One of them's old enough to like be on her own, and then the other one still lives at home. She's like a teenage girl that's like an older teenage girl, and she's been taking the discussions from the missionaries, and she wants to join the church, but their dad doesn't want to betray their Catholic heritage. You know, they keep going back to the whole, well, we're Catholic, our grandparents were Catholic.
Your mom was a Catholic.
Yeah,
your grandma was a Catholic.
Right. And so he has a really hard time agreeing to let the younger daughter be baptized, which puts her like in this sort of limbo state.
She'd have to wait till she was 18.
Right, which in Mormonism is like this mild form of persecution. From other religions, not letting their children join the Mormon church. Like I know people who wanted to be baptized in high school, and their parents. One person in particular, she came from a evangelical household, and so her parents were very, very much against the Mormon church. They saw them as like this, evil cult that would strip you of your Christianity kind of thing, And so she had to wait until she was 18. And so I remember many, many occasions of her getting up during like fast and testimony meeting and just talking about how hard it is to be persecuted against for her religious beliefs and all this kind of thing. And of course, Mormons just eat that crap right up.
Oh yeah.
But it goes both ways. Like I can think of other people who have left the Mormon church and their parents essentially disowned them.
Yep.
And Mormons will never acknowledge those kinds of experiences. Like I had a conversation with my mom once about an experience like that. Somebody that she knew in her ward. They basically just disowned their son when he left the church. Wouldn't talk to him. They took his pictures off the walls, all that kind of thing. And my mom could not believe that these people did that to their son. She couldn't believe it. Because it's so foreign. They only talk about the experiences going from another religion to Mormonism.
Yeah.
They don't talk about it going the other direction.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's a two-way street, and they only acknowledge the hardship of going towards their church. Anyway, so this is kind of playing to that idea, this whole Morales family situation. And so the way that they convince the dad to let the girl be baptized is that the elders just go to their house and strike up a conversation with the dad and then offer to pray with the dad.
Well, because his argument initially is that he can't feel the spirit in the house.
Right.
His daughter can, but he can't.
Right. So
which plays an important part in this scene.
Right. And so they have to get him to feel the spirit. And how does a Mormon get an investigator to feel the spirit? They pray with them.
Yeah.
And so they get the dad to say the prayer, and he basically just says the Lord's Prayer.
Well, he struggles initially. He starts off with Heavenly Father or whatever, and, suddenly he's overwhelmed with the Spirit, and he can't move past it.
Right.
Then he gets down on his knees.
Almost as if he has the same epiphany that Elder Allen had.
Exactly. Yeah. He does. He has the exact same one. This is my Father in heaven. Yeah. Suddenly he feels the Spirit.
Yep. And, of course, this allows him to accept allow, let's see.
It allows him to allow his daughter
that's it,
to get baptized.
I know
he
words.
doesn't join the church.
I know words.
They specifically say that 3 years later he dies of like a heart attack or something without ever joining the church.
Yeah. Which either means that he's going to spend eternity in the celestial kingdom as a reprobate, or
he'll have to wait till his daughter baptizes him.
Right, or exactly. Yeah. Or he gets
his name in the temple system, and then he gets baptized for the dead.
Right.
Because of course he'll accept it.
Yeah. And after so while this prayer is going on, the daughter kind of walks in on this and like peeks around the corner or whatever and sees this happening, and so she stops the elders as they're leaving like the house, and she just goes up and gives them a hug. And this is a big no-no for missionaries. You can't be hugging the sisters of the ward.
Right.
You can't be having
that physical
physical contact.
You can shake
their hands. Yeah. But they talk about this in that cafe. I wasn't hugged, or I wasn't
flirting.
Hugging. I was, I wasn't flirting. I was being flirted. Which means, you can get away with certain things if they're the ones doing it to you.
Yeah.
Like there's this loophole. Like, you can't give a hug, but you can be hugged, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which is just kind of funny that came up later. Anyway, let's talk about Benny. So we already mentioned that he's gone missing, and he misses his baptism date, and he's gone for a couple of days. Did they say how long it was?
Well, when they first go and check it, it sounds like there's like 3 days worth of mail. So he hasn't been home for a couple of days, and then it's a couple of days afterwards that they actually start really looking for him. So it's been almost a week.
Okay, so they decide to say a prayer to help them find Benny, and in the middle of the prayer, Dalton gets up and just walks over to the phone book, right?
Yeah.
And just calls the hospital, and is just like, have you seen this person? Like, this is his name. Like, he would have gone missing, like, on this date or this date, and eventually they track down a hospital where Benny is.
Or was.
They
released him an hour before.
That's right. Yeah. So they released him an hour before they decided to pray, which means, of course, that the prayer had nothing to do with him being found.
Dalton was just suddenly inspired to check the hospitals, which, I'm not going to lie, would have been the first place I had checked.
Right.
Because he has, like, cerebral palsy or something.
Right.
Something went wrong.
Right, exactly. Well, it turns out that he was mugged and beaten, and the hospital basically just let him go because he didn't have enough money to stay.
Doesn't have insurance.
And so Benny's sister, I didn't write down her name. Do you remember her name?
I didn't either.
Anyway, so she asks Dalton, who is a medical school dropout, if
because
he
decided to go on a mission.
Yeah, because he decided to go on a mission. But she asks him if he can do anything about her brother, because clearly he still needs medical attention. And so he decides that he is going to give Benny a blessing. Okay, so this is the second blessing in the movie, and this one is much more impactful than the first one.
It just doesn't really make sense, though. But we can talk about that later, I guess.
Okay, so here's what happens. So they go in to do a blessing, and with priesthood blessings, there's two ways that you can do it. You can just have the priesthood person put their hands on the head and just give a blessing. Okay, and that's the generic way of doing a blessing. It's the way that most blessings go in the church. But if you want an extra potent, super special blessing, one that has extra potent, super special healing powers, you use what's called consecrated oil. So you use a little bit of oil, you drop it on their head, you give a little blessing that kind of lets God know that you're using the oil, and then you give a separate blessing. So you usually have to have two people. You have one person anoint the oil, and then you have the other person do the actual blessing. Okay, so Alan anoints the oil, and then Dalton gives the blessing. Okay, and in this blessing, Dalton basically says that Benny will no longer be crippled. He'll be able to walk and run, and he'll have all of his ailments just gone. Okay, he will be completely healed. We're talking like Jesus level healing.
Yeah.
Like healing the sick.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, and after this happens, Benny gets up, walks to the other room
without his crutches,
which are broken because the muggers are really bad, and he gives his sister a hug. And we talked about Brother Rose before. Okay.
Yes.
His reaction. So he overheard the blessing and what Elder Dalton had said about him being completely healed. Okay. And then he sees Benny get up and give his sister a hug. Okay. Being completely healed. And so his reaction is, he finally pours out his coffee. He's going to commit. He's going to get baptized. Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah.
Okay, anything else to say about Benny and his miraculous healing?
Well,
what was it that you wanted to
Okay, so I don't understand why Dalton blessed him to walk, because he couldn't walk properly before. Like, what Benny was worried about was he kept saying that he thought he was infected and that he was going to die from this mugging. Like, it didn't really have anything to do with him not being able to walk.
Right.
And that was what the blessing was about. That was the miracle. I mean, I get that that's the only, like, physical thing they could show. Like, they can't show his blood suddenly be cleansed of whatever he thought he was being infected with. But it just didn't, I don't know.
Well, it's because...
It was gratuitous praying.
It's because Mormons believe that when you're giving a blessing, what you're really doing is channeling the Spirit of God and just saying what God is telling you to say. Mm-hmm. And so that's what Elder Dalton did. Like, he was inspired by God to say, you're going to be healed. And then he was healed.
Right.
You know.
But he specifically said, you will walk. Mm-hmm. Like, why wouldn't that have been a blessing before any of this happened? Because that could have been a blessing before that had happened.
Yeah, because it's in God's time. You know, goes back to the authority thing. God will do what he wants.
Yeah,
he's like
whatever.
He's like Eric Cartman on South Park. You know, respect to his authority. He does what he wants.
Okay. But we should also point out that Dalton threw his seizure medicine down the drain before he did that.
Yeah, why?
I don't know. It has nothing to do with his ability of giving a blessing.
It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense.
I didn't understand that at all.
No.
Yeah. So
and it wasn't the same time that he usually takes his medicine. Like, at the beginning of the movie, they show him take it in the morning after he's done showering and brushing his teeth. Mm-hmm. Like, it's the middle of the night when he's doing this, and he decides he needs to take the pills. He's holding them in his hand while Benny's sister's talking to him. Mm-hmm. And when he realizes he can't do anything medically for him, he throws the pills one by one down the drain and then goes and gives a blessing.
Yeah. Why?
It's like, are you trying to say that a person that gives a healing blessing needs to sacrifice something of themselves before they can heal someone else?
Right.
Jesus didn't do that.
Maybe it was him giving up the seizure medicine because the seizure medicine makes him groggy and not as in tune with the Spirit.
Then why does he take it in the morning before he goes tracting? That doesn't make any sense, Matthew. I'm just doing apologetics. The end of the movie is where I lose my liking of the movie.
Yeah.
Because it gets really preachy.
Yes. I'm surprised it wasn't this preachy throughout the entire thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, so are we ready to move on?
Yeah.
Okay. So they leave. Mm-hmm. They go to their apartment. They go to bed. And in the morning, Alan wakes up right on time because he's recommitted. Without the alarm. He's super committed. Mm-hmm. He's energized spiritually. They just had this miraculous moment the night before. They healed somebody. Mm-hmm. And you can't wake up Dalton. Because Dalton died.
Dalton died. The many-faced God.
Yeah.
Needs a life for life.
Yeah, you can't take away from the many-faced God. You just can't.
As soon as he threw those pills down the sink, and I remembered that he died, I was like, oh my gosh, it's Game of Thrones. He's giving his life so Benny will live.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, so
again, the ultimate sacrifice.
Yeah, this implies that the priesthood really only works with human sacrifice.
Yeah. And the mission president tries to, say that, Dalton sacrificed his life for the work and that missionaries are sacrificing their lives for the work just in different ways.
Yeah.
Which is a really common theme.
Right.
Sacrificing 2 years of your life.
Mm-hmm. Right, and that's something that the mission president said in his little speech. It's like, Dalton chose to stay on his mission. He knew that he would die soon, and he would rather spend time on his mission than with his family. And the mission president implies that this is like the greatest sacrifice that he can have. What was the scripture that he said? Greater love hath no man than that he should lay down his life for others, or something along those lines.
Something like that.
Right. But his death was completely unnecessary. Like,
he threw away his pills.
Like, why did he do that?
Unless he knew, on some unconscious level that he was going to die anyway, so what the hell's the point of taking the pills?
Right. Maybe, I don't know. But during the mission president's final speech, they kind of tap into that whole scary idea of mortality and death and all that kind of stuff, and making sure that you're doing the right thing in this life so that you can have a good go at it in the next life and that kind of thing. Just one more way that religion kind of ensnares people. Uses their fear against them.
Right.
Anyway, that's the end of my notes. Do you have anything else?
No, just that the end when he's explaining where everyone ends up after their missions is kind of entertaining.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. It's not really relevant. The movie just kind of ends.
Well, okay. So I think in a way they're trying to say that going on a mission isn't going to make your life 100% better. You know, like it's not going to make, it didn't make his parents rejoin the church.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't make what one of the other elders ended up like basically leaving the church and getting a girl pregnant.
Right.
You know,
and then
like
the
it
mission
didn't make
president,
everything better.
The mission president ran into him and his girlfriend.
Yeah, and gave him a quick marriage.
And gave him a free marriage.
Free
It
marriage.
was free.
Right.
Very important that it was
Yeah.
free.
So I think they use that as a way to show that not everything's going to be, you know, golden after your mission.
Right.
Like you can't save everybody.
Yeah. It was just funny. Oh,
Yeah.
and Elder Allen and Sister Frank get married.
Yeah, didn't see that coming, did you?
Right? Sexual tension. Yay. Yeah, and they named their first son Dalton.
Dalton Allen, but mostly they just call him Pops.
Yeah.
Because that's Dalton's nickname.
Yeah, because he's so old.
Yeah. 29.
Yeah.
Although in real life he was 36.
Yeah.
Which is why everyone has a really hard time accepting that he's 29.
Yeah.
Because he looks 45.
Well, you said that, you had a hard time accepting that he was 29.
Yeah.
And, like at the beginning of the movie, and I pointed out that there are actually quite a few Mormons who, because they try so hard to be righteous and to follow all of the Mormon rules and just be, serious. Like they take life seriously. That in effect they age like 10 years. And so I actually knew, I showed you pictures of two people on my mission who look remarkably like Dalton.
Yeah.
Like they are 10 years older than their actual age, you know. And it's just funny.
Yeah.
Because that's a thing. Like Mormons, there are some Mormons who do that. And I knew more people at BYU who were just like that. I can think of other people specifically who were just like that. They tried to be older than they were. And that's, I think, something that maybe we can talk about, like the idea that Mormonism, probably not just Mormonism, but Mormonism kind of steals people's youth. It makes them grow up super fast by putting them on a mission, right out of high school, and then getting married as soon as they can and start having kids as soon as they can. It's not uncommon to have a 40-year-old grandma, in the Mormon church.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, again, I can think of specific examples of people who kind of lament not really living as a young adult, not being a young adult, not going on trips, not doing certain things or having certain experiences.
Because they're afraid of what it's going to do to them.
They just buckled down and got married and had a bunch of kids, and now they regret not living a little bit before doing that. Yeah. They settled down and grew up 10 years too fast.
And they're still incredibly naive.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's...
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
should be pointed out because they're not really that old. Like, they're not adults.
They've had kind of a stunted growth. Like they're adults in child rearing.
Yeah.
And stuff
but
like that.
That's about it.
But they're not... It's the living in the world, but not of the world. Like sure, it'll keep you from doing certain kinds of bad things or questionable things. Okay. But it also keeps you ignorant of a lot of the things that go on in the world. It keeps you ignorant of a lot of aspects of culture and art and movies and books and, and you don't interact with people that have different points of view as much as you would otherwise. It's like I can think of specific family members who have essentially bunkered themselves within Mormonism, and they don't interact with anybody that's not part of their congregation. They just don't. And that is a kind of ignorance. Anyway.
Yep.
Yay, ignorance. Oh, and we should point out, ignorance is not the same thing as stupidity.
Right.
That's an important thing to say.
Yeah.
Because we're not talking about how people who believe this stuff and go this route with their life are idiots or stupid or not thinking or unintelligent. They're ignorant.
Yeah.
They don't know.
In this aspect.
Yeah, in this aspect, they're ignorant. Like, I'm ignorant about lots of things.
Yeah, me too.
And, I mean, I could probably come up with an example, but I'm kind of brain farting right now. But you know what I mean. Like, it's not about intelligence. It's about knowing stuff. And Mormonism really tries to make it seem like Mormonism is all that they need.
Yeah.
You know, like if all you know is Mormonism, that is sufficient. And a lot of people take that at face value and don't expand in other avenues. Anyway, tangent.
Kind of
tangent.
Kind of tangent.
Anyway, I think that's our show.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
If you would like to contact us, you can email us at skepticsquaredpodcast@gmail.com. And you can check out the show's blog at www.skepticsquaredpodcast.blogspot.com. And yeah, we'll see you later.
Bye now.
Ciao.
Bye.
Tot ziens.